so in our last session, we talked about explicit teaching of vocabulary. So today, I want to just bring up two specific areas of the research that we talked about the last time. One is the fourth grade slump, and the other one is Robert Marzano's 6 Steps for Teaching Vocabulary. I think those are the most pertinent for us going forward into this session today. Okay, for the fourth grade slump, you might remember that I said that it was Jean Chall who was the researcher who discovered that if students can't read and they can't understand vocabulary by the end of 3rd grade, they're entering 4th grade at a deficit, and a very, very big deficit, because K through 3, the students are learning to read. 4th grade on, they're reading to learn, and the academic vocabulary gets very, very difficult. So if they're already at a deficit in their reading comprehension and their vocabulary comprehension, that deficit just keeps widening, that gap just keeps widening, and they start to see it in 4th grade, and it just keeps increasing throughout their entire academic career. Then also supporting Chall's research is Robert Marzano, and Marzano came up with the 6 steps for teaching vocabulary. I'm going to go over those today, but I'm not going to be completely faithful to Robert Marzano. There are certainly enough studies out there that say if you follow Marzano's steps with fidelity and absolutely, you will be successful. And there are some studies that indicate that that's not the case. So I kind of pick and choose from a lot of the research that I read, and I've kind of picked some stuff and chosen some of Marzano's theory here and some of his strategies. And he's certainly the basis for the applications that I'm going to show you today, but we're not following it with complete faithfulness. I just thought I'd kind of add a couple of things here and there. Okay, so the first handout that I'm going to give you is basically on the application. And I think that's really the thrust of today's session is how do you apply all of this research that you now know about vocabulary instruction and the 4th grade slump and how to get kids to understand this ever increasingly difficult content that you are presenting, especially science, especially social studies. You know, I'm not quite sure about math because it's not content, it's not text depth. You know, there's not a text depth there, but they have to understand your concepts and they have to understand your vocabulary as well. But when you're reading like a big chunk of your social studies text, if you have 5 or 6 vocabulary words that these kids have never encountered before and you need them to understand those vocabulary words going forward, you know, it puts those struggling readers, it puts them at a deficit. Right? So just quickly to go over what I've just given you. Before you begin your unit of study, it's really important that you choose the academic vocabulary that's necessary for that particular unit. And the academic vocabulary that we're going to focus on is the Tier 2 words and the domain-specific Tier 3 words. The academic vocabulary is Tier 2. Domain-specific words are Tier 3. So academic vocabulary is like analyze, cite, determine, evidence, okay? Those words are going to be encountered academically. They're not going to be encountered in conversation necessarily. They're not going to be encountered in independent reading necessarily, but they're going to be encountered academically. And then, of course, the domain-specific vocabulary, which are the words that you use in your content area, like ratio, longitude, atmosphere, dialogue, etc. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is just pick out the words that you need your students to really concentrate on for that particular unit of study. And then taking from Marzano, I've put down 6 steps. And they may seem kind of just simplistic on a certain level, but when you think about it, when you have a lot of content that you have to deliver, sometimes you want to shortcut the steps of the vocabulary because it takes so long to teach. But if you teach the vocabulary up front and you take that time to devote to having the students understand that the words that they need for the content will come more quickly to them. So it's kind of that upfront loading. So the first strategy that Marzano believes in, and I do as well, of course, is to provide a description, explanation, or example of the term. In other words, kind of tell them explicitly what this term means and provide a context for it and provide direct experiences that show examples of the term, like current events. Like you're teaching hurricanes, right? So you can bring in current events because something is happening right now with hurricanes, and they can relate to it because they're also in the news or on their phones, whatever. They're seeing these words and they're seeing this information. So that provides a context and provides experience. Or show a video. I sent you that video on longitude and latitude where there were these history teachers who were doing this like really upbeat 3-minute video on hemispheres and longitude and latitude, and it was very catchy. I thought it was really very catchy. The second thing is, this is super important, and Candace and I kind of do a modified version of number 2, is that the student should describe or explain the term in their own words. When we do our vocabulary in isolation, we do vocabulary units in isolation, we the way that our units are the way that the book is, they actually just give the kids the definitions. They give the kids the dictionary definitions. We don't do that. We don't just give them that lesson. We have them figure it out contextually and kind of work with it a little bit. And they're using their own words. So that's really important. Once you've explicitly defined the term, then ask students to manipulate the term and the terms in some way, like a picture, a symbol. We call it the non-linguistic representation because studies have shown that the more kids work with a word, and if they're allowed to use different modalities to work with the word, like draw a picture or do a symbol or do Wordle or do any of those kinds of things, they're just kind of immersing themselves in that vocabulary. And of course, multiple exposures to the words. You just keep using them. Keep using those words in your instruction so the kids really own those words after a while. Another strategy is graphic organizers. Really important for a lot of kids who need to write the words and manipulate the words somehow. I think that 3 and 5 go together, manipulating the words and using the graphic organizers. I think they kind of go hand in hand, although you can manipulate in other ways than a graphic organizer, but graphic representations are really important. Word walls, have word walls in your classroom. That provides that print-rich environment for them too, so they're seeing the words all the time. And then, Kathy, I know you'll agree with number 6, games to engage students. I know that you have a lot of success with your cool math games, and if there's free time, a lot of times, I'll give the kids 5 minutes, and the first thing they ask me is, can we go on cool math games? Like, they just love that. And there's so many games that you can look up. I didn't even include any websites or anything because I know you guys know how to do that kind of research, and there's just so many games that they can use to do vocabulary and to learn their terms and to just kind of play around. Okay, so application. What do I mean by all of this? Okay, direct description, direct explanation. I used math, and I hope you guys are proud of my definitions here. I hope I got them right. I tried to get them right. So this is a chart that you can use with your kids, and you can project this on the smartboard for some of the key terms in a lesson. And I just kind of thought that these were number sense words that you might have to teach, at the beginning of a unit. And you would project this chart, and you would project the key term in one column, the dictionary definition or the textbook definition in the middle column, and then have the kids play with the definition verbally, whole class, orally, talk about it, and then have them come up with a user-friendly definition. And as they're coming up with things, you can, write them on the smartboard or type them onto the smartboard, and then as a class, decide what your user-friendly definition for ratio will be. What will make those kids understand what ratio is, rather than the quantitative relation between two amounts and blah blah blah. So if you do that for those key terms, that might help them understand what ratio is. Because they're putting it in their own words, which is really important. And it's something that you can do together, and you can have them suggest the new words that they're going to use to define. So you're working with the class, and they're coming up with it themselves, and you're engaging them in that way. Okay, the next one I wanted to show you is a semantic map. That's what I mean about the non-linguistic representation because it has the picture and the drawing there, and it's also a manipulation. It's more than non-linguistic, but it's a manipulation as well. Okay, they're working with the word, or the words, I should say. Okay, and they're manipulating the words in some way. And these semantic maps, you can do them for all of the terms, and you can, kind of choose kids to be responsible for the kid who's going to hang his or her semantic map up for that term. Like each unit, you can pick, a handful of kids and say, okay, your map's going to go up on the word wall. So they're seeing their representation, and that gives an incentive to the next group of kids who are going to do the next unit or the next words that you use in your lesson. What I like about the semantic map is it makes them think a lot about the words, the definition in their own terms, synonyms, related terms, picture, antonyms or non-examples, what it isn't, and then using it in a sentence because there's practice using that word. Okay, so that would be what I mean by manipulate, number 3 on your on the sheet. Okay, another method that we have is the insert method, and I thought that this would be more appropriate for social studies and ELA for nonfiction and for science. I don't know, math teachers, you tell me if this would work for you, I'm not sure. But the insert method is where you provide a copy of the text to be taught. You have the students read the text in pairs. As the students read, you have them use codes to determine that a concept or a vocabulary word or a concept or a fact is known. That's a check mark. A question mark is next to a word that they don't understand. An exclamation mark shows that it's interesting to them. A plus sign indicates that the word is new, and then they can share their findings with another pair, and then you can you discuss it whole class. It's just further manipulation with the terms that you're going to use. And when I talked to Candace about it one day, she said that if you don't have a copy of the text for them to actually write on, you use colored sticky notes for that, with the symbols on it, with the codes on it. So it's kind of a method for them to kind of own that text themselves. So I'm not sure if it would work with math, but I think it's something that is still worthy. This is an example of a graphic organizer. Obviously, this is a concept definition map. Okay, what is the concept? Here you have plate tectonics I used because I figured you would be doing that also with earthquakes. Okay, so like what is plate tectonics? What is it like? They can compare it to other things that you've taught. What are some examples? And this is a really good way to discuss those complex vocabulary concepts where you really have to go in depth about these concepts and in order to teach that particular unit. And then this is very similar. This is vocabulary self-collection strategy. This is very similar to, I think, the insert method in a way, because the kids are reading the content on their own. They're selecting words where that they think are necessary for comprehension of the concept. So it's very much an ownership thing. And they can select independently, they can select in pairs, they can select in groups. It all depends on how you want to deliver your lesson. Then they share the words are discussed whole class, and then you as the teacher and the students together decide on the list of vocabulary words that you need to focus on for that particular unit or that particular lesson. And it enables the students to kind of learn how to identify those key content words and terms that they need it's kind of like almost a strategy for them on their own. Going forward, if they do this in class and they learn how to learn the strategy, going forward they can use this on any text that they read. Okay? And then of course there's the word sort. I think that the word sort, and Mr. Blair, I used religions, because I know that you touch on religions, right?
Poly, yeah.
So I broke it down into isms, itties, and ams. So you have like your word sort. You have Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and then they can just keep adding to it. And this is great for them to do. I think this is a really good word wall. as you're getting into religion. You
Yeah,
know, you
it's
do a
fun all of a
poster,
sudden.
and then you can do index cards in each of the